The sun had just started to climb over the terminal roof at Jefferson International Airport, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Inside the glass-walled departure lounge, travelers sipped coffee, checked their phones, and shuffled toward their gates in sleepy silence. To them, it was just another Thursday. To Captain Raymond Ellis, it was just another flight. Captain Ellis, a calm, composed man in his early 50s, had been flying for more than 2 decades. With his crisp Navy uniform and signature Silverwing pin, he walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen everything the skies could throw at him. He checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. boarding for Flight 782 to Chicago would begin soon. As he made his way down the hallway toward Gate 17, a few flight attendants greeted him with friendly smiles. He nodded back, briefcase in one hand, ID badge clipped to his chest. A group of maintenance workers moved a baggage cart nearby, barely catching his attention. Everything was ordinary, or at least, it seemed that way until the dog barked. It wasn't the casual bark of a service animal or the eager yap of a pet. It was sharp, loud, urgent. A few heads turned. The sound came from near the boarding stairs outside the gate, where a K-9 unit was completing a final sweep before the plane was cleared for crew and passengers. The dog, a sleek German shepherd, named Ranger, was with Officer Mia Collins, one of the airport's top handlers. She'd worked with Ranger for over 3 years. In that time, she had learned one thing above all else. Ranger didn't bark unless there was a reason. Captain Ellis slowed his walk as he approached. Ranger had stopped dead in his tracks, standing firm at the base of the stairs. His eyes locked on the pilot, his tail stiffened, his ears flattened. Then he let out another bark, lower this time, almost a growl. He stepped sideways to block the narrow staircase that led to the cockpit door. Collins gave the leash a slight tug. "Easy, boy. It's just the captain," she said under her breath. But Ranger didn't move. He stood tall, his body rigid and focused like a soldier on high alert. The atmosphere shifted. Ellis raised an eyebrow, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. "Is he always this enthusiastic?" he asked, trying to keep the mood light. But Collins didn't smile. She was already reaching for her radio. "Control, this is K-9 Unit 3, she said into the mic clipped to her vest. "We have a behavior alert near Gate 17. Requesting secondary inspection. Potential anomaly on Flight 782, within minutes." 2 more officers appeared, walking briskly from the security office at the end of the concourse. Passengers nearby started whispering. A few took out their phones. The gate agent picked up the desk phone and began quietly notifying the flight crew to delay boarding. Captain Ellis stepped back, giving the officers room. He wasn't offended. He'd worked in aviation long enough to know that when a trained K-9 raises a flag, you listen even if you're the one being flagged. Ranger's nose stayed low to the ground, sniffing along the steps and around the base of the plane. He didn't bark again, but his tail moved like a metronome, tense, focused, alert. "I'm not detecting anything specific yet," Collins said, more to herself than anyone else. But he's not just guessing. The passengers inside the terminal were now pressed against the windows, watching a story unfold with no context. For them, it looked like something was wrong. For the officers on the ground, they were just getting started. What no one knew, not the captain, not the handler, not even Ranger, was that beneath the floor of the plane, hidden in a crate that wasn't supposed to be there, something had already slipped through security. And it wasn't luggage. Something had been planted, something that didn't belong. And thanks to Ranger, its time in the sky had just been grounded. Officer Mia Collins knew every twitch of her partner's ears meant something. Ranger wasn't just reacting randomly. His body language was sharp, focused, and trained to a science. When he lowered his head and braced his legs, it meant one thing: he had detected something that didn't belong. She crouched next to him, her gloved hand brushing lightly over his shoulder. "What is it, Boyd?" she whispered. His nose hovered just above the metal threshold at the base of the boarding stairs, but his eyes stayed fixed on the aircraft. He wasn't signaling explosives. This wasn't the alert posture for narcotics, either. It was subtle, but it was a behavior she had only seen twice before, and both times something serious had been uncovered. Meanwhile, Captain Ellis stood off to the side with his arms crossed, watching the exchange. He'd flown out of dozens of airports and been through countless K-9 inspections, but never had a dog flat out denied him entry to his own aircraft. There was no aggression from the animal, only that unnerving intensity, like he was guarding a secret just beneath the surface. Inside the terminal, whispers had grown into nervous murmurs. Passengers leaned closer to the windows as word spread. The pilot had been stopped. A police dog wouldn't let him near the plane. Someone speculated about a bomb threat. Another guessed drugs. A child asked his mother if the dog was looking for a bad guy. Back on the tarmac, the second K9 team arrived with a scanning device and another dog named Trooper. But all eyes remained on Ranger, who hadn't moved a muscle. Protocol says we clear the aircraft for inspection, Collins said, rising to her feet and turning to her supervisor. He's holding firm. I trust him. The order came quickly. TSA officials were notified, and all personnel were asked to exit the aircraft. Flight attendants returned to the terminal. Ground crew stepped away. A no-entry perimeter was established around Gate 17. Flight 782 had just become a security risk. But, still, no one knew why. Collins walked Ranger slowly around the perimeter of the aircraft. His nose followed invisible trails in the air, occasionally twitching toward the undercarriage. Each time he passed the front of the plane, he gave a slight whine, not loud, but consistent. To Collins, it was a clue. He wasn't alerting to the cabin. It was something lower, something beneath. Cargo hold, she muttered. He's picking up something in the belly. Captain Ellis approached her carefully. I'm cleared for full access, he said calmly. If it helps, I can walk you through the cargo layout. Collins hesitated for a moment, then nodded. That'd be useful, but we'll keep you behind the line. No offense, Captain, none taken. Ellis replied. I'd rather be late than part of a disaster. As they pulled up the aircraft's cargo manifest on a tablet, something odd appeared. There was an equipment crate listed as maintenance tools, loaded early that morning, but with a barcode that didn't match any previous entries. Collins frowned. This crate, who logged it? Ellis narrowed his eyes. That doesn't look like a crew log. That's a third-party code. Cargo inspection team didn't catch this, she asked. They're supposed to scan every item, he said. This must have slipped through at pre-dawn load-in. Just then, Ranger barked again, short, sharp, and directed at the cargo door. Trooper, the second dog, stepped in and began sniffing around the same area. Both dogs stiffened. Collins turned to her supervisor. I want the hold opened, now. A mechanic moved forward, opened the side panel of the aircraft, and slowly raised the cargo bay door. As it creaked open, a stale, unfamiliar scent hit the air. Ranger let out a low growl. No one said a word. Collins pulled on her gloves. We're not dealing with a false alarm, she said quietly. There's something inside that crate, and I don't think it was ever supposed to fly. The cargo door groaned as it fully lifted, revealing the dark interior of the plane's underbelly. A faint metallic smell lingered in the air, mixed with something unfamiliar, faint, acrid, and hard to place. Officer Mia Collins stepped back, letting the ventilation clear some of the stale air while Ranger stood at her side, tail frozen midair, gaze locked on the stacked crates inside. She glanced at the manifest again. We've got 5 listed cargo units, but 6 inside. Her supervisor nodded grimly. Secondary inspection teams on the way. Until then, no one goes near it. 2 ground crew mechanics moved forward to assist, wearing gloves and high-visibility vests. Ranger didn't bark again, but his low growl intensified the closer they got to the crate in question. The 6th one, unlisted, wedged in tightly behind, labeled equipment boxes. It was rectangular and unmarked, save for a generic barcode sticker, tilted and poorly attached. No airline logo, no shipping label, no sign of a security clearance seal. It sat in the shadows as if it had been tucked away deliberately. Captain Ellis leaned closer from behind the security tape. That's not one of ours. We use specific containers with tamper seals. This one looks off. The second K9, Trooper, sniffed the air and immediately turned his head toward the crate, ears pricked. He sat down without being commanded, a silent signal used for alerting to unusual chemical traces or electronics that confirmed it. Something inside the container was giving off signals the dogs had been trained to recognize. But it wasn't explosive residue. It wasn't drugs. It was something else. We need eyes inside, Collins said firmly. Let's get that panel off with care. The 2 mechanics used a crowbar to loosen the top edge of the crate. As it popped open, one of them stepped back immediately, coughing. What is that smell? The top panel lifted, revealing layers of foam insulation packed tightly around what looked like tangled wires in matte black plastic cases. The cases had no logos, no model numbers, no visible switches, just cables, some bundled neatly, others coiled like snakes leading into cylindrical components. Collins didn't speak for a long moment. She knew enough about illegal tech shipments to recognize this wasn't amateur work. "These are surveillance modules," she said. "Signal jammers, covert transmitters, high-frequency receivers." Her supervisor looked grim. "Any sign of explosives?" "Not yet, but we're not finished." Within minutes, the bomb squad was called. A remote camera drone was deployed into the cargo hold, carefully maneuvered around the crate to assess the contents. As it scanned the wires, the live feed confirmed what everyone was starting to fear. This wasn't just surveillance gear. It was active. Low-power lights blinked from inside the casing. A built-in battery was still running. One of the technicians stepped away from the feed and said what no one wanted to hear. "This could have powered on mid-flight. It's probably timed or remotely activated." Captain Ellis's voice broke the silence. "Are you saying this thing could have started recording or jamming systems once we were in the air?" "Possibly worse," the technician replied. "Some of these components are used in airborne interference systems. This setup could have hijacked internal signals, radio, GPS, even cockpit communications. At minimum, it's illegal tech. At worst, someone wanted to control what happened in the sky." The entire concourse had now been cleared of passengers. Flight 782 was officially grounded, and law enforcement had taken over the scene. Collins stared at the crate, then looked at Ranger. He was calm now, as if his job was done. She gave his head a gentle pat. "You found it before the sky ever had a chance to." One of the TSA agents turned to her. If this had gone unnoticed, she shook her head. "We're not going to finish that sentence, because what nearly happened that morning was no accident. It was planned, hidden just below the surface of routine. And if not for a four-legged officer trained to trust his senses over what he saw, it might have slipped through, undetected, 35,000 feet in the air." The cargo hold was now roped off with yellow tape, the kind usually reserved for crime scenes, not commercial aircraft. Airport police, TSA agents, and federal investigators moved quietly but swiftly, their conversations low and clipped. The entire area around Gate 17 had shifted from a boarding zone to a full-scale investigation site. Inside the hangar bay, floodlights lit up the now infamous crate. Technicians from Homeland Security worked alongside bomb squad engineers, dissecting its contents piece by piece. A tangle of black cables had been coiled and clipped into specific bundles. Several tiny cameras, no larger than shirt buttons, were found wired to an encrypted signal transmitter. The transmitter itself was military-grade, something not typically found in civilian environments, let alone commercial aircraft cargo. Officer Mia Collins stood nearby, arms folded, observing the inspection while Ranger sat at her side, calm but alert. She hadn't moved from the scene since the discovery, not because she had to, but because she wanted to see this through. Her instincts told her this was bigger than a routine smuggling attempt. "What kind of surveillance setup is this?" she asked one of the technicians. He looked up from a small monitor he was using to trace the signal paths. "The kind you'd use if you wanted eyes and ears on a flight the whole way through. Not just audio and video. It's designed to sync with communication systems. Whoever set this up wanted to listen, maybe even interfere." Collins frowned. "Interfere with what?" "Flight systems, possibly. But more likely passenger communications, phones, tablets, aircraft Wi-Fi. If they could control that, they could manipulate what people send or receive, real-time disinformation, maybe even blackmail surveillance." Captain Ellis had been cleared to observe again and stood a few feet behind them, his expression unreadable. "You're saying they could spy on every passenger mid-air? Or worse?" The technician said without looking up. "They could block external signals entirely, create a digital blackout. If something went wrong, no one on that plane would have been able to call for help." The implications were starting to sink in. Collins flipped open a folder with the original cargo manifest. "This crate wasn't registered. The barcode was forged. We ran the number through 3 different databases. It doesn't exist." "Who signed off on the load?" Ellis asked, his voice tight. "That's the thing," Collins said. "It was manually scanned at for 12 a.m. by someone using an expired employee ID, an ID tied to a worker who resigned over a month ago." Ellis's eyes narrowed. "An inside job. Looks that way." Security footage was pulled from the loading dock. At 4:09 a.m., a figure in a reflective vest and cap wheeled a dolly up the side of the aircraft. The person wore gloves and kept their head down, face obscured by the low angle of the camera. They moved fast, working with practiced efficiency, lifting the crate and sliding it into the cargo bay like they had done it 100 times before. Then they walked away and disappeared into the maze of service corridors behind the hangars, facial recognition still running, an officer reported. But early match suggests this person used a disguise. Could have had airport access under multiple identities. Ellis ran a hand through his hair. So someone with high-level knowledge of flight protocols smuggled surveillance equipment onto a plane filled with civilians, hoping we wouldn't catch it before takeoff. Collins looked down at Ranger. They didn't count on him. A few feet away, Ranger stretched out his front paws, tail thumping once against the concrete. He wasn't celebrating. He didn't need to. He had done what he was trained to do, sense what humans missed. Now the question wasn't what had been. Found out it was why it had been there in the first place and who wanted it to fly. By the time the sun reached its peak, Jefferson International had to terminals rerouted, 5 flights delayed, and a closed-off investigation zone under federal lock. The rest of the airport hummed with business as usual. But Gate 17 was silent. What had almost been just another flight to Chicago was now the center of a national security investigation. Officer Mia Collins stood at a makeshift operations table set up beside the aircraft. Laptops, radios, blueprints, and stills from surveillance footage were spread across it like a jigsaw puzzle. Waiting to be solved, she sipped stale coffee. Eyes locked on the image paused on the monitor, a shadowed figure pushing the crate into Flight 78 to dot. The person had moved too deliberately to be random, too quick to be unfamiliar. And the crate, not some last-minute add-on. It was prepped, sealed, and planted with purpose. This wasn't a test run. This was meant to succeed. "We're chasing a ghost," said Agent Lucas Crane, a federal investigator who had arrived just after noon. Tall, clean-cut, and detail-obsessed, he had already reviewed the footage 6 times. The disguise, the badge swipe, the timing, it's all professional. Collins didn't look away from the screen. "Then we treat this like more than an airport breach. Someone targeted this plane. The question is, was it about the flight or someone on it?" Agent Crane tapped a folder on the desk. Passenger manifest just came back cleared. No persons of interest, no flagged identities, not even a suspicious alias. Everyone was clean. Too clean, Collins muttered. Could someone be traveling under a false identity? Crane nodded, already checking. But get this, one passenger had last-minute booking approval from a private client. The reservation came through at 2:17 a.m., and it flagged a mismatch in their name history. Suspicious? Possibly. The booking came through a shell agency. No linked billing records. Paid in full by crypto. Collins straightened. Who was the passenger? Crane pulled out a printed copy of the boarding record and slid it across the table. The name was Kara Millen. The listed ID was clean, but the agency that booked it, no office, no phone number, just a placeholder website and a disconnected email. Is she still in the terminal? Collins asked quickly. Crane shook his head. One's boarding was delayed. She requested a transfer to another flight and left the airport 20 minutes ago. Took a rideshare downtown. Why wouldn't she wait? That's what we're asking. Collins grabbed her radio. Dispatch, I need a priority trace on a rideshare drop-off for a Kara Millen. Left from Terminal B. Pull camera feeds at exits and notify downtown surveillance teams. Copy that. Ranger stirred beside her, as if sensing the energy shift. Collins glanced down at him. Looks like we're not done. Meanwhile, technicians continued to deconstruct the crate piece by piece. What they discovered next made everyone freeze. Tucked behind the surveillance module was a hidden hard drive, sealed in a padded case with no external markings. Agent Crane carefully lifted it, holding it in gloved hands. Whatever's on this drive, somebody went to great lengths to make sure it got on that plane. Collins raised an eyebrow, and possibly even greater lengths to make sure no one lived to ask why. Ranger let out a soft chuff, barely a sound, but enough to cut through the growing silence. The case wasn't just about illegal equipment. It wasn't about one rogue passenger or a mystery crate. Something deeper had taken root, a web of identities, hidden funding, and a target that hadn't been fully revealed. And somewhere in the city, the one person who might have answers was already disappearing into the crowd. The downtown traffic camera feed stuttered as the image froze on a single-frame Kara Millen, or whoever she really was, stepping out of a black rideshare SUV near a boutique hotel on East Monroe Street. She wore a gray trench coat, sunglasses, and a neutral expression. Her hair was tucked into a low bun, and her carry-on suitcase was gripped tightly. The timestamp was 1:43 p.m. by the time authorities arrived at the hotel. She was already gone. She never checked in, the hotel clerk said, flipping through the guest register. No one by that name. But she came through the lobby and left out the back door 5 minutes later. Officer Mia Collins stood outside the building, her phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with surveillance teams. Ranger sat by her feet, panting lightly from the warm afternoon sun. She ditched the identity, said Agent Lucas Crane on the other end of the call. Left the suitcase in the alley a block away. Nothing inside but toiletries, decoy electronics, and a burner phone with the SIM card removed. So now she's a ghost again, Collins muttered. Not quite, Crane replied. Forensics found a partial print on the suitcase handle. It's not in any domestic database, but Interpol had a match. She's used 3 names across 6 countries, all tied to data breaches, diplomatic eavesdropping, and to near-miss extractions. Collins let out a slow breath. She's not a passenger, she's the courier. Or the one being watched, Crane added. We don't know yet if she planted the device, or if someone was trying to track her. That possibility chilled Collins more than anything. If the surveillance crate wasn't meant for the passengers, then maybe someone had tried to hijack the flight to follow her instead. That meant two parties, one tracking, one hiding, and Flight 782 was just the battleground in between. Back at the airport, technicians had finished decoding the hard drive pulled from the crate. Inside were layers of encrypted data, some of which were still locked, but the first folders had already raised alarms. Their packet captures, said a Homeland cybersecurity analyst. Digital recordings of secure communications emails, voice calls, server logs. Some of them are routed through military-grade proxies. Are they real? Asked Crane, looking over the technician's shoulder. They're authentic and sensitive. Several of these were flagged as confidential from defense contractors. So it's espionage, Collins said flatly. Corporate or state-sponsored, too soon to tell. Crane turned to her. Someone wanted these files. Off-grid. They were being moved manually, no cloud, no trace. The plane wasn't just transit. It was supposed to be a vault. Collins stared at the flight manifest again, her eyes scanning the names. But what if the leak wasn't the passenger at all? What if it was someone on the inside? Maybe even airport personnel. Crane considered it, or a third player entirely. Someone who knew about the handoff and tried to intercept it before it left the ground. The pieces were getting more complex, not less. Every answer opened to more questions. Back in the cargo hold, Ranger was sniffing around the remaining crates. He had already cleared them once, but something caught his attention again, something faint. Ranger, Collins called, watching him pause at a ventilation panel in the wall of the hold. He sat. Not an alert, just interest. Collins walked over and tapped the panel. It looked standard, but inside, tucked behind the grill, was a tiny strip of foam embedded with what looked like a micro-tracker no larger than a fingernail. Another layer of surveillance. Collins stood back. So the plane was wired more than once. We're not dealing with one operation. We're looking at overlapping missions. Crane joined her at the hold entrance. And now our mystery woman is out in the world, either running from something or running toward it. Collins glanced at Ranger. He was quiet, still, watching the skyline beyond the terminal walls. Whatever this was, it had already taken off, and they weren't the only ones chasing it. A soft drizzle fell across the city, coating the sidewalks in a shimmer of silver as traffic lights blinked through the haze. Officer Mia Collins sat in the back of an unmarked SUV, parked just outside the edge of the riverfront district. Her eyes were fixed on the live satellite feed projected on her laptop screen. It wasn't a movie, but it may as well have been. There, said Agent Lucas Crane, pointing. Corner of Adams and Highline. That's her. The facial match confirmed it. Cara Millen, or whatever her real name was. She'd changed clothes again. Now she wore a dark hoodie, jeans, and a crossbody bag. She walked fast, head down, slipping through pockets of pedestrian traffic like a thread through a needle. They weren't going to make the same mistake twice. Collins had 3 plainclothes agents tailing her at a soft perimeter, each 10 seconds behind the other, close enough to keep visual, far enough not to spook her. What's the play? Collins asked quietly. Crane didn't answer right away. He was watching her too closely. Brow furrowed. She's heading for the metro. If she gets on a train, we lose her in 5 seconds. Collins grabbed her earpiece. Team 3, cut her off at the west stairwell. Team 2, stay high. If she bolts, do not engage alone. We want answers, not headlines. But just as the woman approached the metro entrance, she hesitated. Her head tilted slightly, barely noticeable. Then she turned fast and ducked into a side alley. She made us. Crane growled. Move, now, Collins ordered. Already jumping out of the SUV, she and Crane sprinted across the street, weaving through the slowed traffic, Ranger followed tight at Collins's side, his stride fluid and strong. Rain slicked the pavement, and her boots splashed as she rounded the corner. The alley was long, lined with service doors and dumpsters, dimly lit. Too quiet, she's gone, Crane muttered. Slowing his pace, Ranger didn't stop, his nose lowered, body tense. He pulled slightly against the lead, then paused, his paw resting near a steel maintenance door, slightly ajar. Collins pushed it open carefully, revealing a stairwell leading down into the basement of an old print warehouse. She went underground, she said. They descended, boots echoing on concrete steps. The air was damp and cool, tinged with the scent of dust and ink. At the bottom, the door was open, and inside, the dim light flickered on rows of discarded office equipment, old shelves, and one blinking modem light. She's using this place, Crane whispered. It's a relay point. They fanned out carefully. Then, from behind one of the shelving units, a voice called out, calm but firm, "Stop right there. I'm not armed, but I won't come with you." Collins froze. The woman stepped out, hands visible. No bag, no phone, nothing but a hard stare. "You don't understand what's happening," she said. "I wasn't putting anything on that plane. I was trying to stop it." Crane raised an eyebrow, then explained the surveillance gear, the fake ID, the silent getaway. She exhaled. "The crate wasn't mine. I found out someone was trying to piggyback classified data onto commercial flights. I tracked this drop to flight 782. I only boarded to confirm it was happening. And why run?" Collins pressed. "Because I wasn't the only one tracking it. There's another group off the books. They don't ask questions. If they think I leaked this, I disappear. No trial, no call, just silence." Ranger sat between them, alert but calm. Crane stepped forward. "Then you'll need to prove it. Help us find them." The woman nodded slowly. "You'll need more than warrants. These people are buried deep." Collins met her eyes. "Good thing we've got a dog who doesn't care how deep they hide outside." Sirens echoed in the distance. They weren't running anymore. They were going in. The underground command center was quiet to quiet. Rows of servers hummed softly behind glass walls as federal agents in tactical gear moved through the dim corridors beneath the old print warehouse. It looked abandoned from the surface, but beneath the city, it was a hive of unauthorized activity. Mia. Collins stood near the entrance, Ranger beside her, ears up, tail steady. She glanced at Agent Lucas Crane, who nodded as he listened to the latest intel in his earpiece. "We traced the signal from the crate's tracking device," Crane said. "This is where it led. Whoever planted that gear had a command relay node operating from here, off-grid." Collins took a step forward. "So this is at the heart of the whole operation." The woman they once knew as Kara Millen now confirmed. As a covert cybersecurity specialist named Elise Farine stood behind them, her hands still cuffed but loosely. "Not as a prisoner now, but as a key witness." "You're close," Elise said, scanning the server racks with a practiced eye, "but not finished. These systems aren't just collecting data. They're rerouting it, piggybacking secure communication, lines to mask origin and destination points. It's a ghost pipeline built to keep secrets flowing unnoticed." "Whose secrets?" Collins asked. "That's the question no one once answered." She gestured toward a blinking console. Collins approached cautiously and activated the monitor. A live feed appeared, rows of real-time flight data, cargo logs, passenger lists, and encrypted comms from flights across 5 major U.S. hubs. It was all being scraped, copied, and stored from airlines, satellites, and even military-grade networks. "This is bigger than surveillance," Crane muttered. "It's full-spectrum data theft, real-time intelligence from air to ground." Collins scrolled further and froze. A highlighted file read, "Operation Skyloop, Phase 2. She opened it. Inside were plans to embed similar crates on 6 more flights due already in the air, for scheduled within the next 48 hours. The destinations were global: London, Dubai, Tokyo, each one carrying more than passengers, each one unknowingly helping a silent network siphon off the world's most protected information. They were scaling up, Collins said, horrified, and no one would have noticed until something went wrong, Elise added, or until they got what they wanted outside. Sirens signaled the arrival of more federal units. The press hadn't caught wind yet, but it was only a matter of time. The truth couldn't stay buried forever. Crane looked at Elise. "So, who's behind this? Foreign intelligence?" She hesitated. "Not exactly." She reached into the lining of her coat slowly, carefully, and pulled out a folded document. "I took this from the original drop site a week ago. It's a project approval form. signed by a private defense firm, one contracted under a shadow agreement with a government sub-agency. The project was deemed non-attributable. That means if anyone found it, no one could take the blame. It was made to disappear. Collins read the name on the page. It wasn't unfamiliar. She'd seen it before on lobby doors in DC, masked as an innovation think tank. They weren't spying for another country, she realized aloud. They were spying for themselves, to build leverage, Crane said grimly. To control information before anyone else had it. Ranger let out a low huff, as if echoing the sentiment. The command center would be dismantled within the hour. Agents would take the servers, files, and drives for analysis. Rests would follow. But Collins knew this wasn't the kind of case with clean endings. It was the kind that sank into the shadows again, just waiting to resurface in another form. As she stood outside the warehouse with Ranger at her side, she looked up at the sky. A plane roared overhead, its lights blinking against the darkening clouds. This time, it flew clean. No secrets, no spies, just passengers, unaware of how close they had come to becoming pawns in a silent game. Collins patted Ranger's head. Good work, partner, she said. Ranger wagged his tail, eyes fixed, upward watching, always watching, just in case.